It is my honor to welcome on stage Andrew Ng, the founder of Google Brain, chief scientist of Baidu, co-founder of Coursera, and professor at Stanford University. Basically, this is the person who moved machine learning from the lab into business.
Thank you.
And our moderator is Webb, reporter at Bloomberg. Welcome.
So yeah, I'm not entirely sure why it says Roman Alex Webb, but I'm Alex. I'm reporter on Bloomberg's tech team, and of course it's a great honor to have Andrew here on the stage. Anna, of course, has run through some of the key points. If you don't know who he is, well, it's a good thing we have him here today. I think that maybe it would be a good point to start. I'm sure a lot of you know the answer to this already, but maybe just explaining three of the buzzwords that go around in tech a lot of them. We hear a lot about artificial intelligence, we hear a lot about machine learning, we hear a lot about deep learning. And a lot of people use these terms sort of synonymously, but could you maybe break out really, well, like, what's the difference between all three?
Yeah, so I guess AI as a set is the biggest category, and machine learning is a smaller subset, and deep learning is an even smaller subset. So I would say the recent progress in AI, deep learning has been this shiny, rapidly growing thing that is working much better than it was compared to even a couple of years ago. So of all the things in AI, it's gotten the most attention. But as learning algorithms, they can absorb huge amounts of data and learn patterns. Machine learning is a bigger category, just software that can look at data and learn things from it. But really the part of machine learning that's growing the fastest is deep learning. And then finally, the biggest category, AI, includes all sorts of things as well, such as a lot of work in robotics to figure out how to move an arm from here to there, or logical reasoning or probabilistic reasoning. Given diseases and symptoms, can you have software that can estimate your probability that you have this disease or that disease? So AI is that bigger category. It's all good. You should use all of it.
Of course, at Baidu, you were leading a 1,300-person team in artificial intelligence, and at Google, when we're helping develop Google Brain, these huge companies have seemingly bottomless pits of resources and also bottomless pits of data. We've got a lot of startups here. What are the advantages that the big companies have compared to the smaller ones, and what things can startups do which maybe bigger companies might struggle to do?
So we're making this analogy that AI is the new electricity. Just as about 100 years ago, electricity transformed every industry, right? Actually, 100 years ago, we wouldn't have had electric lighting or refrigeration for our food. There were so many industries. Manufacturing, healthcare, transportation, communications are all transformed by electricity, starting about 100 years ago. Today, if you look at pretty much every major industry, I find it difficult to think of one that I don't think AI has a good chance of transforming in the next several years. So I think that both big companies as well as startups could play a big role in transforming these future industries. And today, the scarce resource is really talent and the people with the ability to go after these problems. I feel like maybe there are like 1,000 great opportunities, but only 100 leaders with the know-how of both AI and business to go after all of these huge numbers of opportunities. So I think there's plenty of room for both big companies and for startups to do a lot of meaningful work.
Is it hard for smaller companies to get the data sets they need to do what they want to do? If you're starting from scratch with a blank piece of paper, how do you go about sourcing the data, irrespective of the field, which will allow you to develop the algorithms to reach the solution?
There's been a lot of hype about the importance of data, and data is important. So some startups ask me, right, if the big companies have so much data, could a small startup possibly compete? And I would say that for the giant categories such as speech recognition or web search that are squarely in the bullseyes of the giant companies, the big companies have accumulated so much data that I think it is difficult for a small startup to go head-to-head with a giant company in one of these categories. So for example, take speech recognition. For general purpose speech recognition, the large companies train on anywhere from 5 years or maybe sometimes north of 10 years of audio data, and it costs millions and millions of dollars to accumulate those data assets. So that might be difficult for a startup to do. But I think that there are a lot of new categories. For example, if you want to do some work in medical imaging, maybe there's a category of medical images for a specific disease where globally there aren't that many images taken. And by partnering with a hospital or by clever data acquisition techniques, even a small organization might be able to acquire a very significant data asset enough to launch a product and start to get traction. Having said that, a big company could do this too. So I think for those new verticals, big companies as well as startups could be playing your cards right. You could capture that. And the very common pattern is if through cleverness or data acquisition or whatever, or partnerships, acquire enough data to build a product that's good enough so you can then launch it into the marketplace and start having users use your product. And that then starts this positive feedback loop where having a good enough product lets you have users, lets you get data, so your product then gets better. And over time, you can then accumulate enough data assets to then build a defensible business. So I think this pattern is one that many startups, as well as perhaps a team in a big company, could successfully execute.
In tech as a whole, we've seen, disruption is a horrible term, but we've seen the way that startups and new companies have come into markets originally which perhaps less regulated. So we know very well in the media that there's been, the classic newspaper is dying or even dead, and gradually it's moved into increasingly regulated industries. So healthcare is perhaps one of the last ones which has really been hit in a big way by the tech industry because it's so heavily regulated. Do you think with artificial intelligence as a whole, how do you see the roadmap of what are the industries which can be first tackled and how does it develop from there?
Yeah. I think it's very, I don't know, it's a great question, it's a very complicated question. I think there's some properties of a field that makes it easier for AI to come and transform the field rapidly. I think that actually if you take the taxi industry, right, that's a relatively fragmented industry, and a lot of the taxi operators do not have a strong technical background. So I think that's been relatively easy for the ride-hailing companies to come in globally, really, be it Uber, Lyft, or Didi or Grab, these global players, or multinational players certainly, to gain significant market share. I think retail is another industry where a lot of the operators or a lot of the players have been less sophisticated about technology. Healthcare is an interesting one because a lot of healthcare individuals, like the deans of the medical schools, they're very sophisticated. I mean, the deans of medical schools, they are thinking about AI. So how much AI will enter healthcare versus how much healthcare will figure out AI, I think is something to be seen. Historically, tech has figured out these other fields rather than these other fields figuring out tech. One challenge I'm seeing right now is that an AI person has 500 things they could be working on, whereas a healthcare person, they see AI coming, so they're highly motivated to figure out AI. So I think it'll be interesting to see what types of models end up evolving.
I'd like to dig into healthcare a little bit, if that's okay. I mean, in my previous existence, I was in Germany for 5 years, and one of the companies I covered was Siemens, and they make MRI scanners, CT scanners, and they are very aware of all the data and imaging they can pull and a way of capitalizing on that. And both they and then Philips, which is another maker of medical scanners and medical equipment, they want to build platforms which can aggregate this data. Then on the flip side, we also have Apple Health Kit and Google Health and coming at it from the tech side. Now, the health companies are very well capitalized and they can raise debt very easily and fund vast efforts quite easily. What kind of hurdle does that present to people trying to get into the healthcare space afresh? Yeah,
I think that there is, honestly, there's so much capital, right, floating around these days, both in the US and in China, that while I don't want to trivialize the work it takes to raise capital, that feels to me less of the bottleneck. I think that in the AI era, the strategies for AI are very complicated, right? We're all learning new ways of thinking about how to grow our businesses. So I feel like the scarce resource is actually the executive talent that can sort out these really complicated things. And I think the appropriate executive talent, either in a company like Siemens or Philips, or the executive talent in a startup, could make a very good shot at it. Let me give an example of what I mean. Look, capital is definitely helpful. Capital is one source of power, but other things are important too. To make an analogy to an earlier age, if we take a shopping mall, I don't know what's your favorite shopping mall, but say your favorite shopping mall builds a website, right? A shopping mall plus a website does not equal an internet company. And if your favorite shopping mall CIO says, I built a website, we're just like Amazon, you would say, no, I think there's some differences, right? And I think what I believe in the current era, a internet company plus supervised learning or plus machine learning, that does not equal a truly AI company. So what are the differences between a shopping mall plus website versus a truly internet company? Well, it turns out that with the rise of the internet, we found that we could do A/B testing a lot more and learn really quickly. So part of the DNA of internet companies is just run a lot more experiments. And if you don't run a lot of experiments, well, your competitors will, and they will kill you off. So, surviving internet companies tend to be very good at experimenting because of new capability that the internet enabled. Internet companies tend to push decision-making power down to the engineers because there's just a lot of knowledge and know-how in decision-making that needs to be made by the engineer and not by the CEO. So I feel like these, pushing the decision-making power structures, the philosophy of A/B testing, these were the more fundamental changes that makes a company a truly internet tech company. Now, with the rise of AI, I think we'll see a new wave of truly AI companies. And we don't know yet what it means to be an AI company. I think we're all sorting it out. And companies like Baidu and Google are, among the thought leaders in this, but I think we're all trying to sort this out. But for example, AI companies tend to be much more sophisticated in the way we think about data acquisition. Sometimes you launch a product for the purpose of getting data, not for the purpose of revenue. AI companies tend to much more build centralized data warehouses because if you know that a user did this on your map product and the same person did that, on an email product, or the same person did that on this other messaging product, being able to pull those data assets together makes your data much more powerful. So this is another workflow process that truly AI companies tend to have. AI companies think about automation systematically, much more systematically than non-AI companies. The old job descriptions we have in Silicon Valley of what's a product manager, what's a designer, what's an engineer, those job descriptions are breaking down. I think in an AI company, part of the job of a product manager is to come up with a test set, right? So the workflows are changing and maybe we'll need new job descriptions that didn't exist. Honestly, I don't think, I certainly haven't figured this out. I think we're all trying to figure out how to architect this new AI company to leverage the new AI capabilities that we now have that we didn't have just a few years ago. Just as, maybe a decade ago, it took a lot of work for us to figure out how to architect an internet company to leverage the internet capabilities that we didn't have in the previous era.
It's interesting that you're talking about these changes in the way that the technology has evolved. You've interacted with top C-suite executives at some of the world's biggest companies. Obviously, without going into any specifics, which might get you into trouble, but how have the conversations evolved, and their approach to AI? I assume perhaps maybe 10 years ago there was more skepticism, but it would be interesting to hear how those interactions have developed.
Yeah, I think among the technology executives, the C-suite executives have certainly, come around to seeing the value of AI dramatically over the last, I don't know, maybe 5 years or so. Really, you guys know as we said Baidu, to give Robin Li, CEO of Baidu, credit, he was really the first tech exec globally, as far as I know, that clearly saw, first large company exec, as far as I know, to very clearly see the value of deep learning. I give him a lot of credit for that. And this was before I joined Baidu. I think that one interesting thing is that we're seeing non-tech execs also come around to seeing the value of AI. So, and again, to be really honest, I'm seeing this happen faster in China than in the US. One thing that's happened in China is that the PC revolution or the IT revolution hasn't finished yet, and neither has the mobile revolution, and neither has the AI revolution. So it's all happening at the same time in China. And I think in China, a lot of the seasoned, chairpersons, the really titans of industry, the magnates of traditional industries, non-tech industries, they've seen fortunes made in their lifetime, they've seen fortunes lost in their lifetime. It all happened. You can go up and crash very quickly in China. It just happens very fast in China. So because a lot of these tech execs, C-suite execs have seen it, in the last decade or two, when they see this AI wave coming, I have had, CEOs or chairpersons of major titans of industry in China and outside technology come to me and say, hey, Andrew, how can mobile help their business? Or how can AI help their business? And there's this very strong desire to embrace the latest bleeding technology because they know that they don't embrace it, one of the competitors might, and then their business could be destroyed in a very, very short time. I think the US is also getting there, which I think is great.
Has there been any one turning point or technology? I mean, New York Times, they did a really interesting story, not that I'm loath to give our competitors credit, but there was a really interesting story they wrote about Google Brain and when machine learning was used in Google Translate, and that was really a sort of sea change in seeing how this kind of technology can help products. For these executives, was there one thing where they looked at it and said, now I get it. This is what really has made me aware of its potential.
I'm not aware of any one sea change like that. And maybe speaking more broadly outside AI, frankly, here in Silicon Valley, there is a little bit of an echo chamber, right? There is this effect that one leading tech company says something is hot, be it AI or VR or chatbots or blockchain or whatever. And once one tech exec says it's really hot, well, then everyone else, it makes it safe for everyone else to jump onto the bandwagon. And once the second person is on the bandwagon, well, then everyone else jumps onto the bandwagon, which is why I think we have seen waves of hype with really all the big companies, or almost all the big companies, jumping very quickly to do whatever is hot that year, frankly. But having said that, I think as an AI technology leader, I personally see relatively clear roadmaps for AI to transform multiple industries. So I personally rely on that judgment my confidence in AI is based on that, not based on what people say. So I'm not worried about AI's ability to create tremendous value.
Of course, Baidu has an autonomous car project, and this idea of hype is interesting. Do you think that autonomous driving technology is overhyped, underhyped, or just right?
Boy, I don't. But full disclosure, my wife is co-founder of Drive AI, a phenomenal team, founded by my students and my wife and some friends. I think that autonomous driving is coming, and I think a lot of the details need to be figured out. For example, I think that autonomous driving will take a public-private partnership. We need to make some changes in regulations. For example, I've said this elsewhere, if you're driving along and a construction worker does that, you need to stop. Construction worker does that, you need to go. I don't know any AI team that has a clear roadmap for distinguishing between these crazy hand gestures or a construction worker yelling at the car, no, go that way, right? None of us have a roadmap for building that technology at a level of reliability high enough to make this critical decision that you had better get right about whether you should stop or whether you should go. So I think the solution to that is not to say, well, let's try harder. I think the solution is to give the construction worker an app so they can communicate much more clearly with their vehicle. So I think that with changes like that, I think that it will be possible to make autonomous driving a reality on a reasonable time scale. But I think a lot of the details still need to be worked out. It will clearly transform the way all of us get around. So I have a hard time answering your question because I don't, as a technologist, sometimes I see these strategy people come and say, there's this wave and there's this hype. As a technologist, I actually look at those market trends very little. I tend to look at the customers and the technology because in the end, when I build a piece of technology, who decides if I succeed or fail, right? Is actually not investors, is not the market analysts, although I have a lot of respect for them. In the end, there's a million people out there, or the tens of millions of people out there that are my boss, because by the way they vote, they decide if I succeed or fail. So I tend to pay a lot more attention to my ultimate boss, which is these tens of millions of people that I can help maybe, or that I'll either succeed or failing in helping.
There are clearly a lot of people here who are from the investment community, and they've got to work out the best way of spending their money. And do you think that AI has a role in investing, and what could that role be?
I think AI as a category to invest in is a phenomenal category. I think that.
So please give you money, basically.
No, not me. Just invest in the category. There are lots of great startups that have nothing to do. So look at all those startups and go invest in them. I think that using AI to invest in the very early stage, people talk about this idea. I think it'll be challenging. I could see tools coming up to help investors evaluate facets of a company, like better tools to figure out how good is the software or what's the pedigree of the founders or whatever. I could see things like that, but I think fully automated, very early stage investing, I don't see that easy to realize on a short time horizon. Although, of course, for the public markets, I think clearly automation already has a very large role there.
we're running out of time. Just one final question. I realize you may not want to give away the family jewels, but can you give a hint of what you're up to next?
You know, my wife Carol just said to me just a couple days ago that she said, Andrew, you are the hardest working unemployed person I know. So I am working hard, but I don't have a specific announcement yet.
Well, on that note, thank you very much for your time. Please put your hands together for Andrew.
Thanks, Alex.